This is the third part of the series explaining Volume 0 and the White Room. If you haven't watched the first few parts, the link is in the top right. After the scene with Mikuru, Ayanokoji continues to explain that excessive reactions like Mikuru's were decreasing day by day, and even the expressions of pain were slowly fading away. Even human instincts were eliminated by the brain as superfluous functions. Obviously, the training wasn't getting easier. It was just that the children were getting more and more used to their environment. In a way, this comes to explain a little bit about Ayanokoji's personality. However, this brings the discussion of the true reason behind Ayanokoji's cold persona. The White Room's harsh education clearly had some part to play, but it should be observed that the White Room cannot be used to completely explain his personality. As will be expressed in a few of the later chapters, Ayanokoji's attitude is more of an abnormality than the norm within the White Room. He isn't as broken, per se, like many of the other children. It would almost seem that his personality is less of a coping mechanism, like many of the other children have, but more like a natural part of him as a person. We will never get to know how Ayanokoji would have turned out had he not gone through the White Room education, but it shouldn't be completely disregarded that he may have been apathetic regardless. Without skills to shield himself from every situation, he would eventually have to learn to cooperate with people around him, but that is not to say that he isn't naturally cold and listless. It was just that he was never forced out of his own comfort zone. This is all just conjecture, but the evidence from Volume 0 and many other volumes give the impression that Ayanokoji may have been naturally composed and vigilant, and especially talented, not in the traditional way, but in the way that he is incomprehensibly resilient. Ayanokoji goes to state that, "I've learnt that any prey that seems weak was doomed to be hunted by the strong." With regard to their martial arts training, as such, he hides his weaknesses, as do many of the other children. He then refers to the others, saying that the children never looked tired. One might use this as justification that his harsh education caused Ayanokoji to wear a mask of invulnerability. However, within the context of the quote, it should be noticed that Ayanokoji never once said that he felt hopeless or even weak. Always speaking in third and fourth person, it feels as if he's speaking on behalf of the other children rather than his own feelings. This is likely another subtle hint that Ayanokoji might be naturally distant from his own feelings, always referring to the implied emotions of others to explain his own situations. On a 64 win streak, just like with the written exam, Ayanokoji's improvements are rapid and overwhelming. Whilst it is made clear to the reader that Ayanokoji isn't naturally talented, and instead improved through dedication and persistence, it should be noticed that his level of improvement is clearly abnormal. A normal child does not have so much perseverance, likely a gift from his father. Ayanokoji is not without a genetic advantage. There is a short scene where he spars with Shiro, another child of the White Room. There's not much to discuss about the fight itself. In the next chapter, Ayanokoji comments on the never-ending nature of the project. Even though the number of children was dwindling, the White Room's education never slowed down, continuing unilaterally down its path. Then, Ayanokoji provides a monologue describing a dinner with the rest of the children. This section includes a very large amount of insight into the nature of Ayanokoji and many of the other children. He states that, whilst talking wasn't banned by the education, the children didn't talk to each other, even when they were all left alone. This adds to the idea that Ayanokoji's social awkwardness did not come from complete isolation, but from his unequivocally pragmatic nature. This supports the previous notion regarding his natural affinity. He goes on to talk about how there was no food to like or dislike. It was another pretty standard monologue from him, highlighting his lack of attachment to anything in particular. Then, we get introduced to another major character throughout Volume 0, a young girl by the name of Yuki. She showed Ayanokoji the first smile he had ever seen, and her dialogue with Ayanokoji is not overtly interesting, however what she represents is truly revolutionary. She demonstrated that not all White Room children were like Ayanokoji. Yuki, unlike Ayanokoji, had likes and dislikes. She talked for no reason and was capable of smiling and feeling attachment to things. Shiro also provided some insight into these aspects, but Yuki expressed them to a much greater extent. Yuki, whilst not as capable as Ayanokoji, was still incredibly talented, much more naturally talented than Ayanokoji. This meant that the White Room education was not a simple formula of trading emotion and attachment for academic and physical ability. Not only that, the White Room may not have been as mundane and unsympathetic as Ayanokoji described. It was completely possible that Ayanokoji's perspective is naturally detached, meaning he isn't capable of describing events with the emotion and elegance that they may have had. We never get a monologue from Yuki or Shiro or any other White Room student in relation to the White Room, meaning the only interpretation we have is from Ayanokoji himself. Already established to be an unreliable narrator, it's possible that his insight into the White Room may not be completely accurate. It's completely possible that the White Room doesn't really develop children to the extent that they advertise. Ayanokoji may have a distinct natural affinity, not in the overt way, but in one that would prove his father's hypothesis to be flawed.